Welcome, everyone. This is Kristen Ferguson, Chair of the Planning Board. I am calling this virtual Planning Board meeting to order at 7 o'clock on Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. And let's start with roll call. Let's see who's here. Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet?
Present.
Ms. McEnany?
Here.
Ms. Miller?
Here.
And I don't see Ms. Orvidal yet, but I imagine she'll be joining us shortly. So for planning board members and everybody on the line, we had two agenda items. We had a site plan review of the Concord Children's Center, and that one has been requested to continue without discussion. So we will take a motion on that. And then we had a 7:30 item, and we can come back to that, which was a public hearing. Oh, here comes Ms. Orvidal. And that one has also been requested to continue, and both of those need a time extension. So for folks on the line who were here for Concord Children's Center or the subdivision on Fitchburg Turnpike, those items are going to be continued. So welcome, Haley. And so the large majority of what we're talking about tonight are administrative items. And in particular, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about green zoning and sustainability and how that's going to feed into our planning board goals and projects for the upcoming year as we wrap up. And then you'll want to stay tuned for the end when we have elections of officers. This is Alan's last meeting. And my last meeting as chair, and then we get to find out who is going to be the next chair of the planning board. So don't miss that. Okay, so I would take a motion about the Concord Children's Center application. We have to continue without discussion. I believe we have a date for that. And then we also have a time extension for that. And Elizabeth sent an updated memo with some language around that.
Kristen, I'd make a motion to continue without discussion the application of Concord's Children's Center under to the July 13th, 2021 meeting.
And should we do the time extension at the same time?
The time extension, I'm sorry, I missed that bit.
She added a kind of a new one. They provided a time extension to July 30th, 2021.
Oh, okay. Gosh, I'm one memo back.
That's okay. She's got it on the screen now.
Yeah. So I'd make a motion that we accept the time extension from the Concord Children's Center to July 30th and continue the public hearing without discussion to July 13th.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Second that.
Okay. Mr. Saya?
Yes.
Ms. McEnany?
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Mr. Flint?
Yes, thanks.
Mr. Bosdet?
Yes.
And this Ms. Ferguson, yes. And I believe the plan is to come back at around 7:30 when we can continue the next item. So moving on to administrative business, there has been an email from Attorney Netburn, who represents property owners at 680 Main Street. So this is kind of the request for relocating the driveway at 680 Main Street to McCollar Lane. That was called formerly Kuka Road, and they're building some of the new houses right there. And Elizabeth has a proposal on the screen for us to consider. She recommends that we request from the town manager an opinion from town council about this, so no discussion necessarily tonight because we don't really have enough information because this driveway relates to the definitive plan decision for that area there, which initially was limiting that road to the 4 house lots. So rather than discuss this and we don't have any information about it, we would accept a motion to continue this item without discussion until July 13th as well.
I think on its face that makes sense. But Elizabeth, could you clarify the legal issue that we would be asking an opinion on from town council?
The legal issue is the definitive plan decision for McCollar Lane, formerly Kuka Road, limited the number of house lots to be served by that roadway to 4.
Yeah.
And so this would be a fifth house lot being served by that roadway.
Yeah.
And whether that requires a further amendment to the definitive plan decision, or if the opinion that Attorney Netburn has provided is a legally attainable opinion as far as being able to access McCollar Lane.
Okay, and so to be clear, this is an applicant from the owner of 680 Main Street, but an application from 680 Main Street, but it's not being jointly made by the developer on McCollar Lane.
Correct, it is not.
I see. Okay. Okay. Well, I would make a motion that we request from the town manager an opinion from town council regarding the application from Attorney Netbaum on behalf of the owners of 680 Main Street to determine whether it would be appropriate to permit a relocation of the current driveway, and whether that conflicts with the restrictions in the definitive plan for McCollar Lane, and continue this application without discussion until July 13th.
Is there a second?
Maybe we discuss for a sec,
We can, we
or
can.
what's the,
Well,
when
I
can I
mean,
ask the question?
We're,
Discuss a motion, absolutely, right?
sure, we can discuss the motion. We were just saying, if we didn't have enough facts, is it worth discussing? Are you saying you want to ask some information that maybe could be clarified the next time?
I'm just being cognizant of the use of the town council. Can we just amend the definitive plan to allow this?
That's what I don't know. And I am not going to make an opinion on that matter. After discussing it with the director, Marcia Rasmussen, we both believe that the board should have an opinion from town council.
Okay, I second Burton's motion. I'm sorry, did Burton make it? I second the motion.
Thank you, Kate. Yes.
Okay, but those are good questions. I know we didn't really have any information in front of us, so we're kind of saying, are we missing something here? But I think that when we have the information from town council, we'll be able to actually have a discussion about it and see if there's anything else we could add. So let me go around. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Ms. Orbital,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
and this is Ms. Ferguson, yes. So Elizabeth, unfortunately, I just realized that we didn't put times on either of the ones we just voted to on July 13th. Do we need to do that?
Yes.
Darn. Okay. So was the plan to kind of start those a little bit later? We have kind of a FAR discussion we'd like to get on the July 13th agenda first, and then kind of come back to these items.
Yes, so for the Children's Center, Kate was asking about giving the board an update on the whole FAR research and discussion, having that be at 7. And so the Children's Center could start at 7:30.
Okay. And then can we make the this one for, well, then are we also putting, we're also putting the subdivision on the 13th also, so we'll have to put a time to that. Or do we make that 8:30 and then make the road one 8 o'clock?
So the request for the driveway relocation onto McCollar Lane is not an application for which the board has to have a public hearing
Okay,
or a time certain. So that will remain just an administrative item.
okay, great.
So at 7:30, when you move to continue the subdivision, you could continue it to 7:45.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. So do we need to amend any motions, or are we good now that we've mentioned the time for the Children's Center?
I think for proper stance, Burton should probably just amend his motion to include 7:30 time slot.
Okay. I'd like to amend my prior motion regarding I'm sorry, this is my immediately prior motion or the Children's Center?
Children's
No,
Center.
just for the Children's Center to include a time certain of 7:30.
Okay, so I would amend the prior motion to have continue until 7:30 on, is it July 13th?
Correct.
Thank you.
Do we need to second and take all the vote again?
I'd prefer that, yeah.
Okay. Can
Second.
I get, can I say second? Maybe that's a fourth because it's a second.
I'll
Go ahead.
second again.
All right, Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
and this Ms. Ferguson, yes. All right, sorry about that. Now, is this a good time to mention that we are likely, when we're thinking about meeting and things like that, that we're likely to be in person by that July 13th meeting? Just to kind of let the planning board know that we're moving toward that?
Currently, the status, it appears the legislature will not be making in time for the June 15th end of the state of emergency, any amendments to the open meeting law. So council has stated that boards and committees should be prepared to go back to in-person meetings as of June 16th. I have put in a question to council on whether the public forum for the Thoreau Depot can remain a virtual meeting on June 22nd, since it's not a public meeting. The board is not going to be deliberating or making any decisions. There's no public hearings. It's just a public forum to have MAPC provide a presentation and get public input. So as soon as I know, hopefully tomorrow, I will let the board know if that's going to remain a virtual meeting or in person.
Okay, well, thank you. So we'll all be at the town meeting on the 13th this weekend. Then our next meeting was scheduled to be the public forum, which right now is virtual unless we hear otherwise from Elizabeth, who's checking. And then after that, our next meeting is the July meeting that we're moving all these items to. And it's possible that is going to be, well, it's likely that's going to be in person, and it's likely that we're going to have lots of attendees for that as well. So we'll consider that. All right.
Yes. Sorry, Kristen, can I ask you a dumb question, as I haven't really been following this? What are the rules these days? Like, if we're back to doing things in person, is it like everybody's wearing a mask, or honor system, like you've been vaccinated, no mask?
Yeah, it's a good question. I bet you there's the state guidance that says, and I haven't followed it lately, but it's probably like if you're vaccinated, it's okay to be unmasked indoors or outdoors. But I imagine we can probably include that on the agenda so that it's just clear what the Concord town policy is. I mean, I just don't remember off the top of my head where we are and where we'll be. But so that'll be about a month from now. So good time to get all of that information in place. Other questions? Because those good questions. All right. So we are going to, the bulk of what we're going to do tonight, and I apologize, we'll have to kind of stop and come back at 7:30 and do the continuance for the subdivision application. But we wanted to come back to that green zoning and sustainability update and really kind of move that towards our planning board goals and discussion. So Linda, you probably remember you joined us around this time last year when we were kind of formulating our goals. So now you kind of get to see it from the beginning. And often what we do is we review our goals from the prior year and see how well we move those forward and see if any need to be carried over to the following year. And then kind of what has bubbled to the top. Often Elizabeth and the town helps to show us items that should be done depending on resources and urgency and things like that. So Elizabeth often has some suggestions, but the planning board as well should be thinking about, how we're moving towards the long range plan and what we can do over the course of this year to move us along. So Elizabeth was going to pull up the memo from last year. We were going to look at that just to kind of frame this discussion. But I think a lot of the discussion will be, and Haley, if you're willing to kind of, lead, was to get the board's feedback about sustainability, because we think a lot of those items or a select few of those items will end up on this list. And I invite anyone who is going to continue to lead the planning board to be as involved as they like, so I don't sign us up for anything. But we won't decide today on the goals for the year. This is the beginning of the conversation, and we'll continue to do that and work on that in July.
So Haley, I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't sure what you said something about pulling something up.
Yeah,
Kristen.
I didn't know if you wanted to look at the goals from last year first. Could you just show us those? That way we can see what sustainability related items we had, if any, and just to kind of view them. And then I was going to pass it to Haley to kind of continue to move us along and not let us slack on this front.
Can I ask just a clarifying question of this conversation? Are we discussing all of the goals and talking about how we want to revise that for this year, or are we focused on this? There's, for example, one of the goals is green zoning. We're just talking about that right now, and we're looking at the entire grid so that we can see how it fits into the rest of what we might be talking about.
Right. What I was envisioning was, so this was what we had been working on over the course of the year. So before we kind of transition into what we're working on for the following year, I wanted to see how we did on this. And then I think the focus of tonight would be on the green zoning, and kind of trying to articulate what steps we need to take in order to identify what goal or goals we would want to flesh out more in the month of July. And we typically try to have our list in July or in August, so that we know what we're working on for the year, because as hard as it is to believe, we do start working on those warrant articles like in the fall to prepare for a town meeting, which is traditionally in April. But so I just wanted us to kind of see this list for context, so that people can kind of see what level of goals we've had and how we describe them, and then kind of move into the conversation about what we're thinking about for green zoning, so that we can formulate what level we would need to get to in our next discussion for to actually turn something into a goal. So that's a good question. So on Elizabeth's screen is our 2020, 2021 goals. We start, this time of the year, and then we wrap up at town meeting. And so we had
So for
go ahead.
So for the town meeting last year, I think Article 32 was the two-family that got continued. Article 34 was the PRD bylaw amendments, and then Article 37 was
One that it was probably the corner there, Thoreau Street, changing the boundary.
oh yes.
Yep. So we had planned what we were going to move, and this is because town meeting happened well after we organized these goals for the year. So can you scroll down a little bit? And then, one of our big goals for the year was the Thoreau Depot Business District redevelopment, which, Elizabeth, thank you for working with MAPC on this, and they've done a lot of work. And so we can think about whether the goal is to organize or call for a special town meeting in the fall to do zoning, so we can think about how to continue that goal. This was kind of just the high level work on it. We didn't do anything that, to my recollection, with Crosstown Connect, and that might tie into our discussion about green zoning or sustainability initiatives in terms of transportation. So let's think about that. Elizabeth, you want to give that update?
Yep. So for the Concord shuttle, we were successful in receiving a workforce transportation grant. And then it was the pandemic and the state took the funds back. So We have not heard whether that grant program is going to be offered again in the coming year. It's questionable depending on how the state finances are starting to play out. But if the Workforce Transportation Grant Program opens up again, we will be filing for that grant again, because we feel just having that intertown shuttle, it would be significant as far as the workforce and tourism and all of that. So unfortunately, that's, I can't say definitively, but that's our hope.
Thank you. Any questions about that one? Okay. We did talk briefly and in some of our discussions about proposing a neighborhood conservation district. Well, technically we talked about kind of researching the potentials of it. And I know there was at least one meeting, we've had some information from residents who have been researching this. And, but the board itself, we didn't do much, but I think we did discuss this in terms of, and we decided not to propose anything at this town meeting. So just for thinking about whether we want to continue, I know this is not in the realm of sustainability like we're going to talk about tonight, but just to show kind of some of the things that are on here. Any questions about neighborhood conservation districts?
Just to provide just the context, the discussion with neighborhood conservation districts, there's a lot of elements to them that require significant buy-in by the property owners and the residents in a defined district. And without that initial grassroots effort of a neighborhood, this is not a planning board driven article. It is definitely a neighborhood driven item because of the requirements. The neighborhood you're remembering, Kristen, is Jenny Dugan neighborhood. And after they were researching neighborhood conservation district requirements, decided that the bar was too high, and they started actually looking at the potential of creating a new historic district. So let's just give you the background context of the discussions.
Thank you. And then every year since the long range plan, the new long range plan has kind of been in place, we talk about trying to comb through that chart at the end of it with the items that are highlighted for the planning board to work on, so that we can use those items to influence what our goals are and things like that. I feel like, I know we did have that discussion, and some of the items we had already been working on, but I think that's something that we should, I don't know if it's a goal in itself, but it's something that we should be doing when we are putting our goals together to make sure they inform our goals. But does anybody have any comments about the long range plan, this section in the back? It certainly calls out certain sustainability items, so we can reference them as we're fine tuning.
So what I'd probably suggest for your next meeting is so what I will be doing is following the discussion tonight, as board members have ideas or basically just coming up with here's our big list, and then at your next meeting, deciding what is move forward with in the next year, what may not be something you want to move forward, and but I can also send out again that action items chart and all of the items that were highlighted for the planning board, just so people have that to refer to.
I think it's helpful. I mean, we're not starting from scratch, and each year we kind of chip away at some of those items as well. Thank you. This is what we were just talking about that Kate started work on, researching the FAR, and she gave us that initial pass, and we're going to be talking about it again in July right now. Anything to add on this, Kate, or thinking about how this is written as a goal, thinking about how that might translate into a new updated goal for the coming year?
I think that we should separate out these two. I think we should separate out 6213 from 715. That would be my first recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah. Can I think about
Oh,
that?
yeah. Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, so we had it
Yeah.
on there to do some research, which you started, which is now kind of leading to the new goal that says, yeah, these are very distinct things that are going to likely be treated differently. So, and go ahead.
Like I should write, okay, this is so helpful seeing this because I forgot that our goal was to write a memo. So like, I think I should write a memo, like, just so we can say we did what we said that we were going to do. Like
Well,
for
and
like,
I think
like
your
today,
memo
like this
will
month.
help inform, you know, kind of what our next steps are.
Yeah.
And I mean, you did a presentation. We didn't call out for that, so that counts too. But the memo might just be
Yeah, that
a
counts
nice.
too.
That memo might be a nice summary of the presentation and kind of what our action items are
Yeah,
for going
I
forward.
think so. I think I should do that. So that's helpful. So let me do that.
Okay.
I'll draft something up.
Thank you. This subdivision rules and regulations was on here last July and is probably more important now. But basically, we know that kind of our subdivision rules and regulations are very old and they need updating. But the amount of work that it takes is beyond the staff time that we have, and we really need. And my understanding is we could really use an outside consultant to review it and help make recommendations. And we just didn't have the funding for it from the town this year. And so I believe that we're trying to find out when funding will be available in which, you know, fiscal year. Elizabeth, I don't know if you have heard yet or if we're still waiting to hear.
No, so I did touch base with Marcia this afternoon, and there's two potential avenues that we're going to explore. One is speaking with the sustainability director on whether there are any grant programs out there that could provide funding to help us update the subdivision rules and regs with that eye towards you know, the town sustainability goals, low impact development, you know, all those other sustainability, and it's not so much green zoning, but it's, you know, it's green subdivision rules and regs, and see if that's available. Another option is the planning division has carried over a line item budget for funds for a recodification of the zoning bylaw. And Marcia and I discussed, you know, both have not been done in a very long time, the recodification and the update to the subdivision rules and regs. But there may be more of an emphasis now on getting the subdivision rules and regs updated with and in line with the town's sustainability goals and other green measures that are out there. So we may be able to request that those funds be reallocated. So those are two options that we're looking towards. So I should definitely know more by the July meeting. Kristen, you're muted.
Yep. What's recodification of the zoning bylaws? What does that mean?
I haven't gone through it, so I know that Marcia is on the line, and I'm gonna have her jump in.
Usually there is a committee put together to look at the zoning bylaw and go through where each section to make sure that there's consistency through all of the articles, so that the language is similar, so that if you refer to one area, it uses the same language. It's more of a detailed edit of the zoning bylaw. This usually takes, when I've asked other communities what it costs, it's in the realm of 100,000 to 120,000. And so it is a massive effort, and it requires a separate committee to look at all of this, but it's mainly to make sure that everything that we've adopted is consistent across the board. If you recall, when 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 changes were made to the business districts, there was a failure to identify the accessory uses in those business districts. And so the next year we had to go back and redo everything. This is making sure that there's consistency throughout the zoning bylaw.
Thank you. I mean, it sounds like an important thing. I guess what I wonder is, and we talk about this kind of every year, the major overhaul of our zoning bylaws. You know, are we able to get that on a 5-year plan? I just want to think strategically about kind of the longer vision for any more major changes to the zoning bylaw. I mean, what would it take to do that, to really overhaul our zoning that was first done in the 20s, 30s?
Those are good questions. The most significant change after 1928 was 1977, when the whole zoning act was reformatted at the state level, and there was a very major effort to make our zoning bylaw conform to the state regulations. That effort would probably be Herculean, and it may be actually more than just the recodification process. I would have to ask those who were involved in 1977 to discuss, to say, what all was involved, because I've never undertaken it myself.
I think it probably would be Herculean. And so I guess what I'm wondering is, if we said, this is where we want to be, in 5 years with our zoning, we want our zoning to look like this, and however it's described. We had thrown around the words form-based code, and it's not very clear for many of us on, but if we identified, well, what is not great about our zoning bylaws right now that could be improved with a larger overhaul, could we say, all right, we want it to look like this in 5 years, so to do that we need to do these things over each of the subsequent years, or each of the years leading up to that. And that's all I wonder. I mean, I think there'd be a major improvement with the recodification. I just wonder if that money might be better spent on something else. Opening up to the board for other questions. We don't have to solve this problem now or anything, but just thinking about the vision for this year and kind of for future years as well.
I kind of got lost if we were still just talking about subdivision or everything.
I was just
else.
thinking that. I kind of blew it up. We originally started talking about subdivision rules and regulations, and what a big project that's going to be to overhaul, that we need a whole extra funds to do it. And then I was thinking, and then Marcia was saying about, well, it's potentially that they could review the whole zoning bylaws and do that hardy edit process. And that made me think about, is that going to be enough to really, make sure that we're not make sure that the planning board doesn't have to allow things that the town doesn't want just because our zoning bylaws have not been changed to reflect more of the vision.
Yeah, if I may, so when I looked at this initially, this 0.7, I thought this was a little like when we just, for example, in this town meeting, we're proposing changes driven by a modification of the floodplain requirement. So is this MS? I don't know what MS4 permit requirements are. Is this in line with that, or is this? I mean, when we talk about recodification of the entire zoning bylaw, that is a much bigger thing. This seems, help me understand, Elizabeth, because I don't recall a lot of discussion around this. What this MS4 permit requirements, what the change is, and the scope of how much that threads through the subdivision rules and regs.
So the MS4 permit is the requirement under the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System program, where all communities have to develop a plan that deals with your stormwater drainage, how that is managed, treated, going through, and communities have to, there's different categories in the whole NIPD's program as part of your MS4 permit, education, illicit discharge, monitoring. So there's different categories, and towns have to develop a plan to meet different performance standards in each of those categories, and updating your subdivision rules and regs to deal with stormwater drainage, illicit discharge, and all of those items is one of those, milestones or measures that communities have to meet.
Okay, and so is that within the scope of like the updates we've just made in response to the revised floodplain districts, or is it something bigger and more extensive?
It's much bigger and much more extensive. The updates, the current on the town meeting warrant, the current updates to the floodplain conservancy district is being driven by FEMA, and that's completely, completely separate.
Separate, right? But I'm just thinking, so you've got these requirements that are national in scope that are impacting our subdivision rules and regs, and the implementation. I'm wondering, is there not sort of model provisions, or and what is the implication of us not getting this done? I'm just wondering, as we look forwards to next year, we haven't done anything on this, right? But I'm wondering the implications of what happens if we don't, and what it looks like when we do act.
So I think the implications, if we don't, deals with certain types of funding that the town could be eligible for.
Okay.
But the other aspect of what this would look like, it's not just the requirements being driven by the MS4 permit. It's also the fact that the subdivision rules and regs haven't been updated since 2007.
Mhm.
And that was before LID measures. That was before, rain gardens, or, wider grass strips, or less pavement, or, facilitating projects to be more sustainable in their design as far as roadway and pavement and the stormwater drainage.
Yeah, so Burton, I mean, the way I think about it is like, back a few years ago when we were talking about, well, if we don't do a PRD, then we're stuck with the subdivision. But the point is, like, let's update the subdivision so it is more what we want it to be. And that's what she's getting at from my perspective. And we can get into this, but I sent around Northampton's subdivision rules and regs, and
Yeah.
they focused very heavily on that topic.
You focus specifically on the pollution discharge?
No, sustainability writ large.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is a little confusing because our goal mentions specifically this MS4 permit requirements. And so we'll want to figure out what level we're looking at in terms of proposing a change there for if we include it in an upcoming goal.
And Haley, help me understand. And so when you're is the MS4 permit changes that would be driven by MS4 permit requirements? Is that sustainability writ large? Or are you suggesting we open the discussion to say, hey, let's go and update our subdivision rules and regs and to address MS4 permit requirements and the under the National Pollution Discharge and Elimination System, plus other sustainability changes we'd want to make at the same time?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest, I had completely forgotten about this being in here. I hadn't looked at it. I was prepared to talk about subdivision rules and regs updates because of sustainability, but this was in here. So I hadn't even remembered this was in here until right now.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm asking a bunch of newbie questions, which I shouldn't be, but I'm just wondering, I'm sort of wondering about the scope of this, Elizabeth, and at first glance, and probably my thinking of it when this was put on our goals last year was that this was it's an administrative action that was a matter of, updating the rules and regs, very much like the town meeting article that I have this year, with the as I mentioned, the flood zone stuff. But it sounds like maybe this would be a bigger issue.
So Haley is correct in my thought and my vision, and what Marcia and I have talked about was Northampton's rules and regs are a very good example. It is a much larger discussion with, it's not just the MS4 permit, but what is the width of pavement that we want to see in some of these roadways? One of Northampton's examples is that it can't be a straight shot. It's got to be meander the roadway and have larger grass strips in different areas, and you have to have a cul-de-sac that has to have a planted island. It could be a rain garden to handle your stormwater, which would be an aspect of NIPD's, but it's all these other items, and to reduce overall tree removal. So there's a lot of those elements of sustainability that go into design of a new subdivision road, and that was what Marcia and I had talked about as far as a much larger update that gets into what type of subdivision roads do we want to see, and if those are the types of roads you want to see, then your rules and regs should outline those and allow those types of projects to come forward without always having to ask a waiver. And they should be able to read the rules and regs and say, this is the type of subdivision road that the town wants, and you make those the standards. And if somebody wants to develop something that doesn't meet those standards, then they have to request a waiver. So if there's a project where they have to have a completely paved cul-de-sac, then that's the waiver they have to ask for, not the other way around. So I think that is a much larger community discussion on what exactly is it that you want to see.
Okay, and I have one last stupid question, if I can. So I presume that an MS4 permit is something that is issued by a government agency, EPA or the state. But separately, we're responsible for implementing elements of the NPDES in our zoning bylaw?
In the subdivision rules and regs. I don't think there's requirements in zoning, but to give you an example, some of those milestones, what Public Works does, there's certain notification of the public every year about certain programs. Some communities, they have like dog waste is a significant issue as far as stormwater and the impacts on local creeks and rivers. And so they, once a year, they go out and notify the community. This is why this is important. Communities were required to go out and map all your stormwater outfalls. Some communities didn't even know where any of them were. So how can you begin to monitor them? They were required. That was a step each community has to do. You have to map all your outfalls. You have to monitor all your outfalls. And if, let's say right now, there was a drought for 5 days and engineering or public works goes to a certain outfall and there's water just pouring out of it, well, then there's some illicit discharge somewhere, whether somebody's got a basement drain hooked up to the town sewer or a town stormwater system. Another aspect of MS4 is that you have to make sure that your stormwater, your sewer system is not leaking into your stormwater drainage system. So that was, another, milestone or aspect.
I think I've just realized why I've had trouble understanding this. We are the permittee in this case. The town of Concord as a stormwater system owner. It's not somebody who's proposing a new subdivision. It's the town that needs to make sure the subdivision complies with certain standards because we're the permit holder.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
So building on, so with that in mind, so the town, this is written for when it wasn't approved yet, but so the town does have an approved plan. And so so do we have a specific list of what changes need to be made or what in potential inconsistencies between our rules and regs and our approved permit that are specific to the subdivision rules and regulations?
That's something that I'll have to check with the town engineer on what they submitted. I don't know the details of how it got submitted.
So yeah, this is really vague. Let's make this like so that we understand what the scope is of what needs to be done to be consistent with our approved permit. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So I don't know if
Yeah, we don't have to do it right now.
Well-
But as we draft it, in the coming meetings,
yeah, I mean if
and
Elizabeth
Elizabeth's going to take a stab at it.
if Elizabeth can obtain that
Yeah.
language from the permit, whatever it is, and circulate, that would be helpful to understanding what the goal is relevant to this.
And what Elizabeth will so kindly do is when we give her some input on what we believe our goals should be, she'll take a first pass at drafting them. And then we will edit them and do, no, we want to make this a little more specific. No, we want, this to be the measurable part of it. So we will kind of iterate that a few times. So that's helpful, giving her some guidance now about, how we want to formulate the first draft of it anyway.
So Kristen, I don't know if you want to pause and then do the continuance for the subdivision.
Yep, I realize I'm past 7:30. So
No
if
worries, but you may want to reiterate that the child care center was continued as well, because I think there might be some
Yes.
Sorry, can I just
Go ahead.
finish out that last thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, if what I just asked doesn't make sense, if you can just get the permit and send that out, even that would be helpful. That's it. Sorry.
Yep.
Sorry.
no, that is useful feedback. So if you are joining us as an attendee, the Concord Children's Center application has been continued until our July 13th meeting. And on our agenda right now, we have a 7:30 item that is, the applicant has also requested a continuance without discussion and a time extension. And this one is for the proposed subdivision at 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike. So if there is a planning board member who'd like to make that motion at the end of that 7:30 item, that would be great. And I think we said we would continue this item till 7:45.
Yes.
I'll do it.
So the last one we were continuing until 7:30. Seems that it seems like a pretty big discussion. That makes sense to just provide 15 minutes for that?
So it's not that you're only going to give 15 minutes to it. It's that you take that item up at 7:30 and you cannot, you can take up the subdivision after 7:45. You just would not be able to take it up before 7:45. So what it does is it keeps this same problem from happening if there's further continuances.
I see. Okay. Nate, did you want to chime in, or I'm happy to make the motion?
I'll go for it.
All right.
I make a motion that the board should accept the time extension to August 6th and continue the public hearing without discussion to July 13th for the 48Y Fitchburg Turnpike application brought to the town, where is it? By Quarry North Road LLC
For 7:45.
for 745. Thank you, sorry.
Is there a second?
Second?
Thank you, Burton. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal,
Yes.
Mr. Buzdet,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
and this Ms. Ferguson, yes. So July 13th is looking pretty busy right now. Very exciting. Nobody likes a boring summer. And then there are 2 more items on our list. We're going over our goals for the year and see how we did on them and how we need to shape our upcoming year. Research site plan rules and regulations. Elizabeth, want to tell us a little bit about this one?
It's exactly as you see it on the screen. I can tell you just with the work from home and everything for the past year, there's been no movement on this item.
Yeah, so it's hard because we often sign up for things that are high staff time and our staff is already overtaxed. So I think, planning board members are always thinking about how can we move things forward? But we know that so much is dependent on the expertise of town staff. So when we put our goals together for the year, we kind of have to weigh that. That's why Elizabeth takes time to say how much time would be involved from the board and how much is required from the staff. And it helps us to, prioritize what we really can do this year and what might need to be held off for another year. But while people are on the phone, because we haven't talked about this one in a while, are there questions about what this means and whether we should kind of continue to work towards this in our discussion for the coming year?
I mean, I guess for me, the question is, if there's no change in staff availability, then it makes sense to even make it a priority at this point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and it does relate, I think, to the conversation we're going to have about sustainability. So maybe we find a smaller piece to focus on for the year because that is a pretty big part. But and also when we say research, sometimes that's not specific enough to be actionable. We were going to develop a list of elements that are characteristics of a good site plan, such as landscaping islands, parking lots, EV charging stations, maximum exterior light levels, or minimum tree caliper. So it's possible that as we work on the goals for this year, we can put something a little more specific in place that will move us forward towards this. Other comments before the last one? And this is a good one because we were able to do something on the tree preservation bylaw. Well, so far we've still got to go to town meeting.
So what will happen after town meeting is when those items pass, hopefully those amendments pass, then this actually my suggestion, it becomes changes to the tree preservation rules and regs. There were a few recommendations that Davy Tree had for amendments to the rules and regs, which that would require a public hearing. But it's something that I would recommend go on this list. It's not a significant significant time as far as staff.
Comments from the board? Okay, so I just wanted us to kind of see the level of goals that we had identified for the year. And, my apologies, I always intend to come back and revisit that list throughout the year so that we don't just wait till the end and go, oh, we didn't even pick that up, but it goes pretty fast. So that's why we looked at those and we're like, oh, wow, I didn't even remember that was on there. So let's continue. And Haley, if you don't mind leading, we'll talk about the sustainability. And it seems like we might want to, we're certainly going to have a discussion, but we might want to come up with kind of some goals for what we're trying to do with green zoning, and then think about a process that is going to get us there. And then we can kind of, in the future, list some steps and a timeline and, you know, the responsible parties. And then I think that will help translate into our goals for the year or goals for future years. So while we're going to kind of discuss things and talk about, you know, priorities, I do think that it would be useful to kind of at least agree upon kind of our goals for even having a discussion about green zoning. But Haley, why don't you? Okay,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. Elizabeth, the MS4 permit is online. So we have the permit. Sorry. Also, just Kristen, just to add what you just, so please, I hate when I like cross that off your list. Kristen, when we, just to remind, just to add to what you said, and our homework that we came out of last discussion was for people to think of more specifically about whether they had specific suggestions for green zoning, building on Haley's last presentation too. So I don't know if that, we're gonna get to that too. That's it, sorry.
Yep, perfect. Haley, do you want to show anything on the screen, or do you mind kind of leading the discussion? And I guess, you know, the hope would be to kind of hear from people about priorities that specifically we think the planning board can affect, so that we can kind of think about how to move forward towards that in our goals, and then drive towards that if there are any potential changes to the bylaws that we would propose, but also if we're planning to work with any other town committees towards this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I can just share, I don't have anything to put up, but, you know, share the conversation I had with the Director of Planning and Sustainability in Northampton, which was super useful for me, you know, to talk to somebody live who's been through this rather than just like reading the RMI stuff, and then kind of open it up to everybody else. But Northampton's my new favorite town. The Wayne there is just, he's, I guess, you know, been around living this for decades. So, you know, I had Elizabeth send along 4 docs and an article of his on top, but 4 sort of planning related documents. 2 of them were sort of incentive type bylaws that they passed this year. Well, they're a city, so they don't have to have one town meeting a year. They can just pass things as they want to. And so they have already been passed this year in a whatever process they use as a city, but sort of incentivizing density in exchange for, you know, fossil-free building in, you know, particular areas of town. But I guess just at a higher level, my sort of appreciation from him and what I learned from him was, it really his sort of very unapologetic, you know, messaging and stance that they have as a city to developers, especially, saying like, we are very specific about what we want and where we don't want it, and we're very generous and, you know, pro-business where we do want, you know, development to happen, and that's, you know, obviously encouraging density in the town centers. And so I guess the way I thought about how we should think about things is some of what we've already talked about today, which is like strengthen and be much more specific about, you know, site plan review and subdivision. I mean, and you know, the sort of other pillars that Wayne talked about for kind of making sure they get what they want is, and protect what they want is, you know, wetlands, their wetlands bylaw, tree preservation, and earth removal, and those 3 we already have and have updated, and hopefully we'll pass the earth removal. And so thinking about, well, what haven't we touched yet? And that is the subdivision rules and regs, obviously. And then, you know, maybe strengthening like the sustainability review piece of site plan review. And that's sort of on the more of the stick side of things, if you will. And then like on the carrot side is like really incentivize density and bonuses in exchange for fossil free, to get what they want in the dense areas where they want it. And so that's kind of the 2, I guess, categories of work that I think we could think about as a town. So, yeah, I don't know if, there's a lot that Elizabeth sent out, but I think that we could fortunately and hopefully draw from a lot of what they've done already, especially on the subdivision side of things. Again, like if anybody flipped through it, like the number of times, low impact development and, other green topics were mentioned is just impressive. So I think he was very clear that they make it very difficult to do a subdivision. They make, and so they write the rules that way, because they don't want them unless they're going to be exactly what they want it to be.
Mhm. So thank you. Could I take a quick step back from that? So I hear you say, strengthen sustainability of, in our site plan review and things. Like, to me, that's kind of jumping to the solutions. And I just want to make sure we have articulated what our goals are, like you're saying, so that this is what we're going. So it sounds like we want to encourage low impact development would be one thing. And I think we now have a definition of low impact development in our bylaws. Didn't we work on that at least for site plan review?
I thought we had that.
Or we did it with PRD? Okay.
I don't
So
remember, honestly.
yeah.
But I
But I
think
mean,
even more to the point is like require it. And my understanding is we can require it.
Okay, so we could say, let's just for the sake of discussion, require low impact development that has been defined. And so we'll identify whether we've defined that the way that we want or want to define that further. We want to encourage fossil fuel free new construction. There's probably an easier way to say that. And I'm just kind of putting these out there so that we can see if that's what we mean. Because what I want to do is kind of list the 3 or so main goals that we're trying to affect, and then say, does the planning board have the authority to, or how can the planning board, impact these things? Because I'm concerned about going straight to strengthening something if we don't realize, if we can't measure how that's going to change the goal that we really want. So those were the 2 things that I thought of was kind of the low impact development. We want to require low impact development. And we want to encourage fossil fuel free development, either new construction, and we have to think about whether we want that in renovations, or I think that would be a helpful place to start for me, because then we say, okay, what are the ways that can happen, which you've already looked into. I just want to make sure that then we can prioritize those things.
Well, I don't know if we have a say over renovations, but yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth.
So well, on that topic, as far as one, Haley is right. To do things in a city is much easier, but it's the conversation of what is within the planning board's ability to affect change. And so, like LID measures. The planning board can, through the subdivision rules and regs and site plan rules and regs, make those a requirement. And so the board does have the ability and can do that. To require, the board does not have the ability to require fossil-free development. But what Northampton did, the planning board does have the ability to propose amendments in the zoning bylaw that allow density bonuses for developers who choose to say, yes, we'll construct a fossil-free development in exchange for this density bonus. What that is that's a voluntary selection by the developer to do that. And that type of zoning bylaw is something that the planning board can research and propose to town meeting. So I think it's like Haley said, it's coming up with these different tools, and then figuring out how the planning board, under what mechanism and what ability the planning board has to move forward with those.
Okay, so what are other thoughts from the board?
I have a thought and a question. My first thought is in terms of the goals. I think that the goals for us are set forth in the long range plan. So I don't think we need to come up with new goals. I think we should just refer back to those goals. But can I just, Haley, there's a couple different documents that you sent out and that are now posted to the Concord website. Can you just quote which ordinance it is that you were talking about in terms of where it's cited, like LID is cited all over the place? Like which one are you talking about?
Yeah. Oh, I think that was the file was too big, so it's actually in Elizabeth's in her email. That's the link that goes to the subdivision rules and regs. So there were 3 attachments she sent, and then 1 link.
The link to Northampton rules and regs?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I guess I'll go. So I guess this might be more for Elizabeth, and you sort of already answered it, I think, but what from Northampton do you think are things that are good takeaways that we could implement, that we could get through town meeting, and that we think we wouldn't have issue with AG or anything like that, although I assume no issue with the AG if Northampton is already doing it.
So when it comes to site plan rules and regulations, that does not require town meeting approval. That would just be a public hearing by the planning board. So there's quite a bit of latitude with what the board could propose in their own site plan rules and regs. I can't see the board proposing something that the community is not completely in support of, or proposed something that just ultimately has every decision by the board being litigated. But there are a lot of elements, as Haley said, it's as far as for a site plan, the requiring LID type drainage and other specific elements of a good site plan. So that's definitely something that the planning board can do. Other items, Northampton's subdivision rules and regs, I'll agree with Haley, they're phenomenal. I don't know, Haley, if you had the conversation with Wayne, whether, they have a much larger planning division, or so I don't know if they did those updates in-house or whether they had
Yeah, I actually did ask him that, and he said they've done most of all their green zoning stuff in-house, so I was surprised to hear that. But
so those types of updates to your subdivision rules and regs, again, that's just a public hearing. It doesn't require town meeting approval. I think when you get into some of the green zoning elements where it is actually a requirement, something that to update in the zoning bylaw, I think becomes more challenging. There's always going to be, 2 sides of the discussion of, let's provide a density bonus in the Thoreau Business Depot for mixed use development and a higher density residential. There's going to be support, and then there's not going to be support. So those types of zoning bylaw elements just have a higher hurdle because not everybody is in support of denser development, regardless of what it is in exchange for. So does that answer your question?
I have a list of suggestions. Can I, Nate, sorry,
Sure,
Nate,
let's hear
were
it.
you? Okay. So, number one, overlay districts. Can we implement an overlay district that requires buildings be net zero, any new buildings be net zero? For example, StarMet. Also, for example, the middle school site. Also, for example, new buildings in the Thoreau. I understand that these are all different, but like this is what, like, I think
So
a list would look like. And so maybe we can make a list and then start, and then then, I think we should go through each one, like look at special permits, look at site plan review, look at subdivision. And my recommendation is just to focus on building energy efficiency and energy use and not look at low impact development for this year. Because it's too much, it's too big. So just focus on this one thing, which is energy use through building infrastructure.
But I
And look
actually
at it
think that's a higher hurdle. I mean, I actually think that's a higher hurdle, because we know we can already, we know we have the authority for low impact. The whole energy use side of things is, and I asked Wayne the question, because I do think actually the RMI document was a little bit misleading to my disappointment, because I thought we could just do an overlay district that required nothing but fossil free. And my understanding from him is that that's actually not the case. It still has to be an option. So I think as of now, and Elizabeth, I'm sure you probably agree.
So
I don't understand what I've read then. What was it that I was looking at that were those changes proposed and they haven't been approved? Because it looked like the way it was written was that they were going to do that. So is that not true?
At this point in time, it is, as far as any type of action from the legislature, it still has not happened. Currently, a community cannot require somebody develop a fossil-free, project. You can't require it. I don't
Through
care
an overlay district.
I don't care if it's an overlay district or anything.
Okay. So I guess why are we
can-
looking at Northampton then? We don't know if any of that is acceptable.
Well, because Northampton, it's not a requirement. A developer can choose to do fossil free in
It's an
exchange
incentive.
for a density bonus.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
I was
there's-
looking at a part of it that it wasn't written like that, but okay. So we need to focus on incentives.
Well, I
How
think,
about net zero?
well, I think so. That's why I think we need to figure out what we're trying to move towards, because I feel like we're getting ahead of ourselves, right? And so if we want to get to net zero, we have to define what net zero means, and that's kind of what Gary and the folks kind of brought to us, because there's different definitions that we could use, and so that might be kind of one of our goals is to define
I don't
that.
think that comes first. I think.
But then how do we know that's what
where
we're
in the
working toward?
code, like where in the code we could do that, and then we can figure out what's practical for what net zero is. But
Well, that's
I mean,
interesting.
I'm not arguing with your bigger point, which is like.
So I'm gonna agree with Haley. There are so many low-hanging fruit items for change as far as LID measures that can be much more readily effective, and the board's ability to make those changes and in a very short period of time, and not a year or two of some type of project like the Thoreau Business Depot, where you have to develop such level of community support to say, yes, we're going to give you a density bonus if you do this. What I think what Northampton's is we'll give you the density bonus if you do this. And if you choose to do that, this is how we want it to look like. But it's still a choice. And I'm not saying that, the board, shouldn't or can't start looking into that. But I think there's a lot of other things that are part of the whole sustainability beyond just a fossil-free and energy use. There's, there's groundwater, there's tree preservation, there's reduction in pavement, there's walkability, there's all these other elements that are within the planning board's purview to implement. And that's what to Burton's previous question, those are all the elements that I'm thinking that should be looked into as far as updating the subdivision rules and regs and developing site plan rules and regs. Parking lots. Parking lots shouldn't just be 300 Baker Ave is the perfect example of the worst parking lot ever. There isn't a single protected pedestrian walkway within that whole parking lot. It is one huge heat island. Those are also sustainability measures as far as green zoning. It's not just building and energy usage.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comment soon, but I want to hear from the board, from Burton, Ellen, Linda, Nathan. What are your questions and comments?
If I may, my comment, first couple comments, Elizabeth. So Haley, thank you so much for getting the Northampton stuff. I did look through the 3 attachments that were sent. I did not look through the link. I'm getting a Mimecast security warning when I try to go to that link about registering my device to access it. And then when I try to access it, I get an error. So if there's another way to get that document, it would be great, because I'm really keen to see somebody who's managed to do subdivision control rules that have that go beyond streets and sewers, right? I mean, it's like something that's actually forward thinking.
Burton, I'll try downloading the document and see if I can reduce the size of the PDF to a point where it can be emailed.
Or can you post it on the website?
I could post. I'll try both ways.
Okay.
With
That would be
regard
great.
to their zoning ordinance, is that the current one or is that proposed? We're talking about different documents. But if we Google Northampton bylaws, are we going to get to the right bylaw, or this is
I'm
something
not
that's
having luck with
proposed?
that either, Kate. I think we
Oh.
can, for whatever reason. I mean,
Okay, I mean, I was having the same
Google
issue with that link, but I thought maybe you could through another way. Thank you.
But I think if you just Google Northampton subdivision rules and regs, it should be there. But maybe.
Yeah.
And I'm particularly keen to look at subdivision rules because, as Elizabeth, you pointed to, oftentimes you come up with an idea that sounds really good in town and you discover that there's half the people think it's a bad idea and half the people think it's a good idea. But if we can act on rules, that would be really good, because it was my impression of when we were looking at things to provide incentives and carrots is that your incentive is only effective to the degree that it's an improvement from it provides something of value from the status quo. And I think that we were finding, when I'm trying to remember, when we were looking at the density bonus for PRDs, we really didn't have much room to operate in, because the status quo was pretty good if you were looking at it from a developer. So I think one of the things we'll have to look at, Haley, your description of Northampton in terms of they are very out front in terms of saying we don't want to do these things here and we'll do these other things here. That I think that's the direction we have to go in, and we have to understand what the disincentives are. What restrictions have they put in place for development, and how adaptable are those to the town of Concord? I mean, when I was looking, for example, at the list of permitted by right things in one of the documents, there were some things in there that I think people in Concord would freak out about and say, no, we don't want that by right. And so I was very curious about to see what would the things that were not permitted or that would require a special permit, so that we could provide incentives through that special permit process. Anyway, that just a general comment that it would be really helpful to understand more how they make development challenging, but at the same time sort of unleash the potential for meeting some of their sustainability or goals by providing incentives. And again, I just really like to see that subdivision control rules.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so Burton, to follow up on that, and maybe you know, we can have a further discussion about this, you know, next time when you continue to refine your goals and your projects, is which would affect more change, updating the subdivision rules and regs or developing site plan rules and regs? And
How many site plans have we done and how many subdivisions
um,
in the last 5 years?
oh, I don't, I only think you've done two subdivisions in the last 5 years.
Probably, yeah, about 2
And
that I recall.
I don't know, a couple dozen site plans.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of telling. Maybe.
But does that get to, I mean, like how many units were in each, or like what's the square acreage? Like, I don't know if you can just look at the number of projects and figure out what the impact will be.
Yeah, I agree that more analysis would be required. I'm just,
Well, I mean, does that mean that we couldn't do work on both? Is that what I'm hearing, is that the amount of effort that staff time it would take, we really have to prioritize, right?
I could not do both, no.
Right, and I think that, so, but that's why I'm thinking we have to kind of look at the long range plan, you know, the long range plan, but also the planning board long range plan, and say, we want to get here in 5 years. So this year we'll do this, next year. And so if we can march toward certain things each year, and it would be good if one led into the other, so that we don't do something and then have to make a change later on, if that makes sense.
But if, you know, if there is funding available, which that's the question I don't know right now, to, let's say, hire a consultant to update the subdivision rules and regs, then I think it is possible to do both.
But what we were talking about originally on the old plan was updating the subdivision rules and regs specifically about that one aspect. And what we were really talking about is a larger update to it, right? So we just want to be clear
Yes.
when we write the goals for this year. And I mean, we can certainly, you know, put everything as a goal. I don't like to put it as a goal if we're not going to actively work toward it. However, we could still capture it as a goal, knowing that we could, you know, carry it forward as well. Nathan and Alan, oh, go ahead.
No, so I mean, at this point, all this discussion was basically throw all the things out there, make a list, and then go through and refine it and discuss it, and you know, figure out those details and what stays, what goes.
Do you feel like you have enough to start an initial list?
Well, there's certain things that that come to mind for me that the board has discussed over, you know, the last year. You know, the board had MAPC do that initial parking assessment, and you know, whether the board wants to take the next step into looking at updating all of the parking requirements and to have them be, you know, more consistent with industry standards. So that was one element.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's been a good discussion so far, and sometimes it's easier for us to react to something and see if there's something important missing, or how we're going to, you know, refine those. So Alan or Nathan or Linda, do you have any other points that you'd like Elizabeth to think about as she kind of drafts the first list of our goals for the upcoming year?
I don't have any others.
Alan says no. Linda?
No, I don't think I need to mention at this time.
Okay, so let's hear from the public, but then Elizabeth will kind of bring us something to review. Our July 13th meeting is going to be pretty busy. Were you thinking that we were going to look at it again then?
It's either then or unless the board wants to schedule an extra working session meeting.
Okay, all right, well, let's put it on for the 13th and see. Go ahead.
Sorry,
Kate.
do we have one meeting in July? Is that,
No, you have two.
oh, so couldn't we do it the second meeting in July or?
Starting to get kind of late.
Yes, typically you have your memo completed in July. So the next meeting is July 27th.
So she's got to give us something to react to. We've got to make sure so that we end up with the wording that we want so that it's clear to us and you know, ideally measurable. So then she'd take that back and we'd finalize it at the next meeting if we could do that. We could agree upon that.
So Kristen, another option is I don't know what everybody's schedules are like, but you can host one more virtual working session. What's today? Today's the 8th.
To continue this kind of discussion.
Yeah, either next Monday or Tuesday.
If the board is jumping all over that. Alan is the only one that voted for that, really.
I guess I'm not like clear on. I feel like we've kind of shifted this over to Elizabeth more than is fair in terms of our goals to propose something for green zoning. I don't know.
All I'm doing is creating the list. And then the board gets to refine it and discuss it and figure out what elements of that list you want to do.
Is this
So-
for just green zoning or for everything for the year?
It'd be for the whole year goals, which would include some green zoning. Linda?
We just send our own memos into Elizabeth with any thoughts.
Oh, sure.
Fine.
I think that'd be great.
Monday, and then would that be too much then to maybe digest all of that? So we, rather than have another meeting?
I think that would be great. Oh, is everybody on board with that? So if you have ideas between now and early next week, you can send it to Elizabeth and she'll send us her draft list and we can think about that prior to the July 13th meeting for sure, and then discuss it on the 13th. Okay, think about that for a minute and then let me open it up to public comment about our goals. And then I apologize, we've been making someone wait for their appointment, and we will get to that in just a moment. So if you have a public comment, particularly about goals that you would like to see on the planning board's list, every year we do this. You can find the current goals on the planning board's website and our webpage there. And so we want to make, these are the action items we're working towards. So if you are listening and you have a comment, you can use the raise hand function and we will hear from you. And then if the board has any other closing comments or direction for Elizabeth, we'll do that. And then we will get to the appointment for the West Concord Advisory Committee. I'm not seeing any hands up, which makes me think it's broken. Or that we've covered everything already. All right. So let's, so Elizabeth, thank you for doing that. And thanks Haley for kind of bringing that information to light. And I do appreciate the fact that we want to think big, but also think about kind of what we can affect in the near term as well, as we kind of continue to incentivize people. I think I see a hand up. It's Miss Dritt.
Hi, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green, Unit 4. Thank you very much. You guys, I know, have the hardest job because our knowledge is way behind our ability to do things. And I really appreciate the way you're trying and looking at other towns who are also trying to drag the entire country into saving our ability to survive climate change. Keep it up, please. Find ways that you can require and incentivize net zero, all electric, all of the water and wastewater and soil conservation and tree conservation, because the best machinery for pulling carbon out of the atmosphere is a mature tree. So thank you. Please keep it up. We can find creative ways to make the developers do it, even if we can't, even though we have to wait several years if we ever get to have net zero zoning requirements.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are now at the point where the West Concord Advisory Committee has recommended Ann Sussman as a new full member for a 3-year term ending on April 30th, 2024. Ms. Sussman is on the line and we did receive her green card so you could read all about her. Does anyone on the planning board have any questions? Or Ms. Sussman, could I ask you to introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi. You are doing a great job. I'm very impressed with your meeting. You have a lot to do. My name's Anne. I'm a licensed architect. I am also an author. I collaborate with the professor of planning at Tufts University. And my new book, Cognitive Architecture, 2nd edition, Designing for How We Respond to the Built Environment, comes out in 3 weeks. And it's the first book, we think, in history to have 70 full color pictures of eye-tracked architecture. So what's happening in architecture and planning is because the human brain runs on subliminal energy and subliminal processing, now planners and architects can start to know that. So you can predict how people respond to a building before it's built. Welcome to our new AI world. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, I don't mean to go on here, but yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing. It's a big paradigm shift for planning. So now, like, I'm a licensed architect, and the word happiness, stress, those kind of things were never used in my education, nor they were mentioned on the licensing exam in the United States. And now that's all changing. Now PhD neuroscientists are hired at Apple and Facebook and Google, and now the human experience, the user experience, is a big term in tech, and it's coming into planning and architecture. I told you more than you need to know.
That is interesting. How long have you lived in Concord?
So I lived in, I'm sitting here at Bradford Mill, where I've had a studio for 10 years. And we helped make, working with John Boynton, we helped make an art enclave here. We have 19 artists here. And so I've lived in Concord 7 years, but I've been here in this space at Bradford Mill 10 years. I can't believe it, I feel so old.
And have you attended the West Concord Advisory Committee meetings?
Well, I think Amy can tell. I've been there. And we've worked together the past year, and because we also are updating, we're kind of dealing with the same dilemmas you're dealing with, trying to make more pedestrian-focused development, more safe walkability. So we recently did a kind of an update. I'm not sure that's quite to put in front of the West Concord design guidelines. An update that kind of puts all this together, the idea of form-based code, the idea of really understanding the human experience, designing for safe walking, safe streets. Because it is true, planning in the 20th century was really around the automobile. And now we realize you can't do that anymore.
Well, that's great. Any planning board members have questions for Anne? Then I would entertain a motion. I think it's on our memo. we're recommending her for a full member. Recommending
I
that
don't
she.
have the memo, so forgive it in front of me, but forgive me if I mess up the language. I make a motion that the planning board vote to appoint, to recommend Ann Sussman for appointment to the West Concord Advisory Committee for a full term, and it's coming up on the screen, for a 3-year term ending on April 30th, 2024.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay. Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes, and thank you.
and this is Ms. Ferguson. Yes. So that's great. We will look forward to hearing from you among our other members as well. And Alan is probably going to be moving to the West Concord Advisory Committee next, so you guys can compare architecture language, and you guys will never get anything done because you'll just be talking about that stuff the whole time.
Thank you very much.
Well, great. Thank you for hanging in there until now.
A
Thanks
very
on behalf of the advisory committee.
Oh, good. All right. I believe we are on to minutes now. 2 sets of minutes, May 13th and May 25th. Did anyone have any comments about either? The May 13th meeting was, I just lost that. The May 13th meeting was the public hearing where we did our articles. We proposed them. That was a pretty quiet meeting, but did we capture everything correctly? And then May 25th was when Haley started the green zoning talk. And then we kind of followed up with our discussion about the articles.
Didn't have any comments?
Okay, I'm seeing no proposed edits. So if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt both of those as written.
I'd make a motion that we adopt the minutes of May 13th and May 25th, 2021 as drafted.
Oh, okay. I wonder if Ms. Felshen has an edit that we might have overlooked. Would you like to speak, Ms. Felshen, if you have something about the minutes?
No, I do not have something about the minutes. I have
Okay.
something about Article 36, which has a misconjugated verb, but I don't know if that matters before or is fixable before a town meeting.
Okay, all right, let me adopt the minutes then, and then
Yep,
we'll hear
yep,
about
yep.
the. And I just, what, are we sending her a copy of these so she can edit these before? All right, sorry to interrupt Burton. So Burton proposed adopting, and then I interrupted before he could get a second.
Second.
Thanks. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Ms. Orbital,
Yes.
Ms. McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes,
and this Ms. Ferguson, yes. So we've got our minutes done, and thank you to Nancy and Elizabeth for so timely working on those. And Sue, do you want to let us know about is it something that we are going to fix? Article 36 is which one?
Oh, good grief. Article 36 is floodplain district,
Yep.
etc. And the only problem is it says the exact boundaries of the district is defined, and it has to be either boundaries are or boundary is. And maybe that's something so simple Elizabeth can just fix it without having to do anything at town meeting. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't see that that's going to impact the interpretation of that.
Okay, then never mind.
Well,
Thanks.
right, but we usually have to adopt it as written, so I mean, we have to see about that. All right, well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. And Elizabeth, could you do the research into how painful that's going to be to fix?
I will.
All right. So now, now we've got liaison assignments for the appointments for the year, and the committees that we typically liaise with are Community Preservation Committee, the West Concord Advisory Committee, HATS, which is the Hanscom Area Town Selectmen, the Comprehensive Sustainable Energy Committee, and the Climate Advisory Committee. Elizabeth usually handles MAGIC, which is that the group of communities in this region. Burton, I believe you said you'd like to continue on CPC, if that's okay. Unless there are other folks who would like to unseat Burton.
Yeah, I would be keen to continue, but I'll always welcome anybody else that's interested.
I think we're happy to have you do it, but I just want to make sure. Linda, you are new to this, and so I want to see if there's something in particular you're interested. Basically, we kind of volunteer to do these things and keep up the best that we can. Was there something that you wanted to learn more about that you'd like to do?
Any of them would be fine with me, and since I am not familiar with most of them, I think any would provide an education. So I will be happy to go in the cleanup crew on this one.
Okay.
Whatever.
I'd like for hats to be cleaned up, Linda.
Yeah, was that once a month or less frequently? Okay.
I think it's about 1 month, like 10 months out of the year. I think they don't meet during the summer.
And there is some information that comes out of that. So
Yeah,
that
it's a regional thing, so it is interesting. And Linda, I've noticed that have a broad interest, so I don't know, you might enjoy it.
I'm sorry, which committee was that?
It's the Hanscom Area Town Selectmen.
Sure, I would be happy to do that.
okay.
Great.
And Nathan, do you have any preference on doing something?
I will say it's not the Climate Advisory Committee, it's the Climate Action Advisory Board.
Thank you. This cab. Yes.
But I'm happy to give that to somebody else. It's basically once a month, and
Okay.
I've just been reading their minutes. So
Yeah. Haley, is that something that you're interested in doing? I feel like we should be doing more with cab.
Sure. I can't say I've been a very good West Concord Advisory Committee liaison. No.
I hear you. For
Oh.
myself. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. And I'm agreeing with my own lack of thing. So
I was like, can I be on that too with Haley, or can I be like?
Yeah.
in
I
the
think so,
loop
because
with
then at
Haley?
least maybe one of you guys can go each time or something like that. So let's try that.
Because I'm not going to be. I don't want to be on the West Concord Advisory Committee with
Okay.
not living in West Concord.
So we also have Andrew coming on board. We might be able to talk Andrew into being on the West Concord Advisory Committee.
Do we know if he lives
liaison.
in West Concord?
He is.
Great.
So we could volunteer him, and if he doesn't want to, he could let us know next time.
Chris and Andrew is on the meeting, so.
Yeah,
I think-
I was gonna not let him answer and just take
Oh.
it. No, I'm just kidding. Andrew, you're welcome to speak up. Would you, basically what we're offering is, for the year, we like someone from the planning board to kind of keep tabs on these committees and bring anything relevant to the planning board back. And sometimes we're able to attend the meetings, sometimes they conflict with our own meetings or other. And so we just try to keep up with the minutes and other way.
I can try to keep up.
Okay,
And try
thank
to,
you.
Yeah.
And, similar to Haley, I would say my knowledge of the working with the Comprehensive Sustainable Energy Committee was not as good as I would like. They often had meetings on Tuesdays for a while, but they are very good about sending agendas and minutes and things to me. So is there anyone on the board who doesn't have a liaison? I think everybody.
And sorry, Kristen, if you were interested in stepping off, that I could do that one instead of. I'm interested in being on one of the energy ones, climate or energy.
The climate action advisory board is more of like the policy. The CSEC is more of like the consumer education. They do a really good job of making case studies and publicizing things, and they have a lot of events and things like that. So you might be more interested in CAB.
I think you're right. Thank you.
Okay. So Nathan, would you like anything? I can't remember if we signed you up.
So are you saying you're not going to take?
I'm saying you could have CSEC if you'd like.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
That one.
I think I did a good job there. I think I do not have one, so. All right, but I'm happy to pay attention as well. All right. Anybody else?
If I can,
Yeah.
Burton is
CPC.
CPC, Haley is Climate Action Advisory Board, Andrew will be WCAG, Nathan is the Comprehensible Sustainable Energy Committee, and Linda is HATS.
That's right.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. And now we have come to the highlight of the evening, the election of officers. This is a highly contested race. Everybody who's running needs to give a speech and bring treats. So who would like to nominate someone? We have chair, vice chair, and clerk. Would anyone like to make a nomination?
I would like to nominate Burton for chair. Burton Flint.
Burton, do you accept the
Not to be
nomination
confused
before
with
we
the
have a
other
second?
Burtons.
I've never met
There's only
another
one Burton
Burton.
in this town.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd be happy to do that. Thank
Okay,
you.
and is there a second? No, there's no.
I'll
All
second.
right, Alan seconds. Burton, just why do you think you'll do a good job? No, I'm just kidding. Is there any discussion? Otherwise, we can vote. All right, Mr. Saya, Burton for, should we do it one at a time or do we do all of them, Elizabeth? We could do all of them together.
You can do one at a time or a slate of officers.
Let's do a slate. We will do that. Okay, so Burton is on tap for for chair. We will accept a nomination for the vice chair position.
So is next in seniority, was that Alan? And he's coming off.
Yeah, it's Nathan next.
Nathan? Nathan, the spotlight's on you. I'd make a recommendation, a nomination of Nathan as vice chair. Nathan Bosdet.
I
Second.
second, as long as you accept that nomination. Nathan, are you good with that?
I accept that.
Okay.
Thank you, Burton.
And
Burton Flint. Thank you, Burton Flint.
as we are heading into in-person meetings, the role of the vice chair is to bring snacks to every meeting. So just want to make sure that's
I look
clear
forward
and
to that.
is in
That
the
is
minutes.
definitely one thing I'll do.
All right, and then the third thing is the clerk. And we've got a couple of people who have been on the board for a couple of years who might like to step into the clerk position. Would either of you like to nominate the other one?
Do you want to mention what the clerk responsibilities are?
They signed the minutes, all of the printed copies of the minutes at the end of the year. And they bring drinks to the meeting. Nathan's just coming off, so he's more current on the role of the clerk.
I think the role would have been different had we been in person. I think that.
I don't know.
It
It's not
entirely
terribly
different.
taxing. But
No.
Elizabeth, anything else that they need to know before they assume that responsibility?
Yes. If the chair and vice chair are not able to be at the meeting, then the clerk would have to act as chair.
Okay. So is there a nomination?
I'll nominate Kate.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second. I second
Okay.
Kate McEnany.
And Kate, do you accept the nomination?
I do accept, and I also just want to mention that Haley and I had a discussion leading up to this moment, and we kind of discussed that there's a tradition in our planning board of the clerk moving into the vice chair, but we didn't. We kind of thought that in discussing the pros and cons of us taking on the role or being, stepping up, taking on the role, we thought that for this year, maybe we wouldn't have that kind of, prejudice, and that we'd have a new discussion, next year,
Sure.
who would be stepping into the vice chair. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Absolutely. Every year is a new year. Do not feel like you need to progress into anything. Okay, so I would make a motion that the board accepts this slate of officers. Is that a good enough motion? Burton for chair, Nathan for vice chair, and Kate for clerk. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Burton, seconds. Mr. Saya,
Yes.
Mr. Bosdet,
Yes.
Mr. Flint,
Yes,
Ms.
thanks.
McEnany,
Yes.
Ms. Orvidal,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes, and thank you all.
and this Ms. Ferguson. This is great. And big thanks to Alan for his 5 years. And we really do hope to see you again as in public comment and hear your constructive feedback. And we certainly look forward to seeing kind of how you serve the town next and definitely seeing you around town. So thanks, Alan.
Thank
Thank you, Alan. We're gonna miss you.
Really
Kristen,
appreciate it.
could you clarify one point? This is effective as of the
Oh.
meeting after town meeting, right?
Yeah, I should have done that. So yes.
Okay.
So
Just-
town meeting is this weekend. So the next planning board meeting that is held will be with the new officers.
Okay, thanks.
Kristen, thank you for your leadership as chair.
Yes,
It's been a big look.
Thank you.
very
So
collaborative,
happy
Kristen.
So happy to do it. Also, I'm so happy to have kind of one more year where I can, support this group as well, kind of knowing what it's like to be chair. So it's I think it's a good perspective to have. So Elizabeth, any other board or liaison updates from anyone or Elizabeth?
Not for me, no.
I had a liaison thing, but I'm stepping on the West Concord Advisory Committee liaison, but just something I wanted to mention because the planning board had previously been involved. I happened to be perusing various committees' minutes because that's my life these days, and I noticed that the the town received a complete streets grant, which was being combined together with funding from essentially as required by the approval of the building behind the West Concord Post Office, that development, and some town funding. So I think altogether $250,000 to $300,000 to do a complete streets reconfiguration of Commonwealth Ave from about the train tracks going, I think that's northwest towards the Neshoba Brook Bakery. And the last week at the WCAC meeting, the West Concord Advisory Committee meeting, I believe the town engineer presented a plan, which differed very significantly from a prior proposal that the planning board had pitched back a number of years ago in terms of improving the sidewalks in particular. I took it upon myself, not on behalf of the committee, but just personally to provide written feedback to the town planner, or not the town planner, not to Elizabeth, other than to ask whether it would be coming before the planning board, but to the town engineer. And I thought that the planning board might be quite interested in that because it's a very sort of, hands-on planning item that we may want to weigh in on. But my understanding is that perhaps the plan is already shifted somewhat from, or is proposed from what was presented. So at any rate, just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. What's the timeline for that?
I don't know. Well, actually, no, generally speaking, it's suggested that the plan would be finalized over the summer with, I think, bids maybe in the fall with construction in 2022. So I guess I do know, but that was the plan. But I know several people have weighed in, and I think the plan will be adapted. The planning board had provided input based upon the agreement that was reached with that developer in terms of providing some sidewalk bump outs and the like with a formal plan back in like 2016 or so. So anyways, that is something that for whatever this process is that the town engineers is doing along with a complete streets grant, we just wanted to make sure that prior feedback was incorporated. I did not do anything, of course, on behalf of the planning board since we haven't discussed it.
Okay, thank you for doing that. Questions about that or comments?
I have an
All right.
update as well.
Okay, great. Kate, and then Susan. Go ahead, Kate.
I just wanted to mention that I participated in a meeting that was organized by the League of Women Voters that had the someone from the Attorney General's office on the topic of open meeting law. And I was participating because I'm interested in the communication between board members. And I have the feeling that I'm curious to know if open meeting laws chills board communication that could be productive, that isn't actually restricted, or that maybe, and so I guess I just wanted to let you all know that I'm thinking of that. And if you're seeing more emails from me, that maybe, you know, I don't really know what to do with that. And maybe it's to talk to Elizabeth, you know, next, but, you know, maybe in my role of clerk, I don't know. I think that it could be useful for us to be emailing each other more into between meetings to keep up
Elizabeth is saying that she will talk to you
communications
about
going.
that so that we comply with open meeting law.
Well, that's my point.
Yeah.
Is
So-
that I want to comply, and I think
Yeah.
that there's communication that we could be having that is in compliance.
Yeah, you want to
So-
comply. Yeah, exactly. And still
So
move
that's-
things forward and come prepared and things like that. Okay, thank you. I'm glad you attended that meeting. It tends to be kind of a confusing legal issue that we as voluntary citizens are not purposely trying to ignore, but we try to do the best that we can with our understanding. So thank you for furthering your understanding of that. So great. Susan?
Hi, yes, I'm following up on that. The open meeting law, every time I go to a session, I learn there's been some tweak or something changes. But what I feel compelled to tell everyone is that the open meeting law was put into place by the state legislature, which does not have to follow anything in the open meeting law. They don't have to post meetings. They don't have to, do all the things that we have to do, which does make communication difficult, but it's what we have to go by. So we just have to figure out how to be effective despite it. But I also wanted to say our liaisons will be perhaps be changing or perhaps not from this assignment. But I wanted to just say how much I've enjoyed observing the last 2 years. There's been so much work that the planning board has done, and you conduct yourselves with grace and dignity, and that's not really easy to do in all circumstances, but you really do a wonderful job. And Elizabeth, I particularly want to say to you, yay for your keeping everything grounded, and also go Bruins. I've thought about you during this series. So that's
Thank
it.
you.
I hope everyone has a good summer.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I don't know if there's any other public comment from anyone. I think we probably heard from pretty much everybody, but just to make sure that we close with public comment. But you only have 2 minutes because I'm going to adjourn before 9 o'clock. All right, I'm seeing no other hands. So we will adjourn this meeting at 8:58, and we'll see everybody at town meeting.
See it. That's
All right,
Sunday.
thank you.
See you Sunday. Bye.